There are things in this world that weigh upon a man like an unseen chain. He does not see them, yet he carries them. He moves through life, draped in garments that do not belong to him, robes woven from the threads of fear, self-doubt, and the ever-pressing burden of what others think. But the chosen ones, they do not wear such things. They do not wear the heavy cloak of fear, for they know it is stitched together by lies. Fear is a borrowed garment, passed from one generation to another, whispered into the ears of the uncertain. It tells a man where he may go and where he must never tread. It convinces him that the fire in his soul is dangerous, that the call in his heart must be silenced. But those who are chosen, those who are set apart, strip themselves of such illusions. They step forward, unburdened, unafraid. Neither do they wear the fabric of approval. There are many who wake each day and dress themselves in the opinions of others, as though their worth is something to be measured by the nods of a crowd. They seek to be adorned in praise, to be wrapped in recognition. But the chosen ones do not seek to please the world, for they know the world is fickle. One day it exalts, the next it forgets. They clothe themselves in conviction, not applause. Nor do they wear the tattered rags of self-pity. Many hold on to their past like an old, worn-out coat, convinced that their wounds make them who they are. They wrap themselves in sorrow, finding comfort in their misfortunes, believing that suffering is their identity. But those who are called to a greater purpose do not drape themselves in the past. They walk forward, leaving behind the garments of regret, for they know that what is behind them has no claim over what lies ahead. And above all, they do not wear the crown of arrogance. Some believe that being chosen means standing above others, that to be set apart is to be greater. But the truly chosen ones understand that power is not found in lifting oneself above men, but in lifting men up. They do not dress themselves in pride, but in humility, knowing that true strength lies in service, not superiority. To be chosen is to walk lightly, unencumbered by all that the world would have you wear. It is to clothe oneself in courage when the road is uncertain, in wisdom when the path is unclear, and in truth when the world would have you believe a lie. The chosen ones do not wear the chains that others willingly accept. They do not burden themselves with what does not serve their purpose. Instead, they walk freely draped only in that which is eternal, clothed only in that which is true. Clothing is far more than fabric stitched together to cover the body. It is a language, a statement, a declaration of who we believe ourselves to be. A warrior does not dress in the robes of a beggar, nor does a king wrap himself in the tattered garments of a servant. Yet, many walk through life unaware that they are clothed in things that do not belong to them. They wear identities they did not choose, habits they did not form with intention, and beliefs that were draped over them by others. A man is often unaware of the weight of what he carries until it is stripped away. From childhood, he is dressed by hands other than his own. First, by parents who, in their effort to protect, clothe him in feared. Not go too far, do not dream too big, do not risk too much. Then, by society, which wraps him in expectations, this is who you must be, this is the path you must take, these are the limits of what is possible for you. Without realizing it, he becomes adorned in garments not of his own choosing, ones that slowly define the way he walks, speaks, and thinks. The garments of identity are some of the heaviest to wear, for they are woven with threads of perception. A man who is being told he is weak will clothe himself in weakness, even if strength resides within him. He will wear hesitation as though it were a natural part of him. He will drape himself in self-doubt, believing it to be his true skin. Yet, if the same man had been told he was powerful, that he was capable, that he was destined for great things, he would have worn a different mantle, one of confidence, of determination, of resilience. The difference is not in the man, but in what he has chosen, or rather, what has been chosen for him. Habits, too, are garments that we put on daily. Some dress themselves in discipline, in focus, in purpose. Others wear laziness, procrastination, and carelessness as though they were born with them. But no man is born, dressed he learns to wear what he sees around him. A child raised in an environment where excellence is expected will naturally clothe himself in diligence. A child surrounded by apathy will wear indifference without question. Yet, neither state is permanent. The garments of habit, though worn for years, can be changed. A man may wake up one morning and decide he will no longer dress in the patterns of his past. He may remove the robe of excuses and put on the attire of responsibility. And in doing so, he transforms not by changing who he is, but by choosing what he will wear. Beliefs are perhaps the most deceptive garments of all, for they feel like skin. A person who has been told since childhood that the world is cruel, that opportunity is scarce, that happiness is fleeting, will see life through the fabric of those beliefs. He will interpret every event as confirmation of what he has already accepted. If he experiences failure, he will say, "Of course, this is how life is." If he meets success, he will find a way to sabotage it, for he does not believe he is meant to wear victory. On the other hand, a man who has clothed himself in belief, true belief that he is capable, that life is abundant, that obstacles are merely stepping stones, will see the same world differently. Where others see endings, he sees beginnings. Where others see burdens, he sees lessons. The world itself does not change, only the garments through which it is perceived. The weight of these unseen clothes is often unbearable, yet people continue to wear them out of habit, out of fear, out of the mistaken belief that they have no other choice. They hold on to them because they have never stood naked before themselves, never stripped away all that was placed upon them to ask, "Is this truly mine? Did I choose this, or was it chosen for me?" It is a rare man who stands before the mirror of his soul and dares to remove every piece of false identity, every illusion, every inherited fear, until only his true self remains. But those who are chosen, those who are set apart for something greater, do not wear what is not theirs. They do not wrap themselves in limitation, nor do they dress themselves in the approval of the world. They understand that to step into who they truly are, they must first strip away what they are not. They must cast off the garments of doubt, of conformity, of hesitation, and stand clothed only in the truth of who they were always meant to be. There is a weight that many carry, yet few acknowledge. It is the burden of false identities, the heavy layers of expectations, fears, and limitations that have been placed upon them by others. These burdens do not come all at once, nor do they arrive with warning. They accumulate over time, piece by piece, word by word, shaping a person's very sense of self until they no longer recognize what is truly theirs and what has been imposed upon them. From the moment a child begins to understand language, he is told who he is. He is labeled sometimes with love, sometimes with indifference, sometimes with cruelty. If he is constantly reminded of his shortcomings, he will wear them like a badge, carrying them into adulthood. If he is told he is not enough, that his dreams are too big, that his voice is too small, these ideas will settle upon him like a thick, invisible cloak. He will carry the weight of these words without realizing they were never his to bear. Many walk through life adorned in identities that do not belong to them. A man who has been called a failure too many times begins to believe it, and so he wears the identity of defeat, allowing it to shape his every decision. A woman who has been told she is insignificant begins to shrink herself, her voice barely above a whisper, because she has accepted the burden of unworthiness. A child who has been made to feel like a burden himself will grow into an adult who apologizes for existing. These identities, once placed upon a person, become second skin, and soon they no longer question whether they are true. The burden of false identities is not just emotional, it is physical. A man weighed down by self-doubt moves through the world differently than one who is sure of himself. His shoulders slump, his steps are hesitant, his eyes search for permission rather than opportunity. A woman who has been burdened with insecurity does not walk with the same confidence as one who knows her worth. Her presence is diminished, not because she lacks strength, but because she has been made to believe she should take up less space. These burdens are not simply ideas, they manifest in posture, in movement, in the very way a person occupies the world. There is another weight, just as heavy, just as suffocating the burden of conformity. Society has a way of molding people, of pressing them into shapes that are acceptable, predictable, safe. A person learns early on that there are certain ways to behave, certain paths to follow, certain dreams that are considered practical, and others that are dismissed as foolish. To step outside of these expectations is to invite criticism, and so many choose to remain within the boundaries that have been drawn for them. They accept the burden of fitting in, even when it crushes the very essence of who they are. Some carry the burden of fear not their own, but the fears of those who raised them, taught them, influenced them. A father who failed in business warns his son not to take risks. A mother who was never allowed to chase her dreams tells her daughter to be realistic. These fears are passed down like heirlooms. Generations clothed in the same anxieties, the same limitations, the same whispered warnings to stay safe, to not dare too much, to not expect too much. And so, a person inherits a burden that was never meant to be theirs. Then, there is the burden of perfection. Many live under the weight of needing to appear flawless, to meet impossible standards set by others. They exhaust themselves trying to maintain an image that is not real, hiding their struggles, suppressing their emotions, fearing that any sign of weakness will make them unworthy. They wake up each day and put on this burden like armor, but armor is heavy, and over time it wears them down. Perhaps the most deceptive burden of all is the one of seeking approval. There are those who measure their worth by the validation of others, constantly adjusting themselves to be accepted, to be liked, to be seen in a favorable light. They become chameleons, changing their colors to blend in with their surroundings, never standing too far apart, never making others uncomfortable with their authenticity. They silence their true voice, dim their true light, all because they have been made to believe that acceptance is more valuable than individuality. But this burden is a lie. It was never meant to be carried. No person is born with self-doubt, with fear, with the need to conform. These things are learned, absorbed, placed upon them by those who came before. And just as they were learned, they can be unlearned. The chosen ones, the ones who rise above, are those who recognize the weight they carry and choose to set it down. They strip away the false identities, the unnecessary expectations, the borrowed fears, and stand unburdened by what is not theirs. Only then are they free to walk the path that was always meant for them. There is a subtle chain that binds many one that cannot be seen, yet it dictates their every move. It is the chain of external validation, the need to be approved, accepted, and applauded by others. It begins early, when a child looks into the eyes of those around him, searching for signs that he is enough. A smile, a nod, a word of encouragement, these become the first indicators of his worth. As he grows, this need for validation deepens. He learns to measure himself not by his own standards, but by the reactions of the world. A person who seeks approval is like a traveler who looks to the sky for direction but never learns to read a map. He waits for signs, for signals, for reassurance that he is on the right path. He walks cautiously, always aware of how others perceive him. If they smile, he feels he is moving correctly. If they frown, he begins to doubt himself. His journey is not his own, for it is dictated by the ever-changing opinions of those around him. The hunger for approval is insatiable. The applause of today is never enough for tomorrow. A person who depends on it must constantly perform, adjusting himself to fit the expectations of others. He becomes a master of adaptation, shifting his personality, his dreams, even his beliefs, to align with whatever will make him most acceptable. But in doing so, he loses himself. He no longer asks, "What do I truly desire?" but instead, "What will they think of me?" He does not wonder, "Is this right for me?" but rather, "Will this make them proud?" His own voice grows quieter, drowned out by the opinions of the crowd. This burden of external validation is especially heavy because it is never satisfied. A person may spend years chasing recognition, only to find that the moment he achieves it, the standard has changed. The world applauds success, but it does not linger on it. A man who earns the admiration of others today must work twice as hard to maintain it tomorrow. The crowd is fickle. It moves quickly from one spectacle to the next. To live for its approval is to live in a constant state of performance, never resting, never content, always seeking the next source of validation. One of the greatest dangers of external validation is that it makes a person dependent on forces beyond his control. If his confidence is built on the praise of others, what happens when that praise is taken away? If his worth is tied to how others see him, what happens when they turn their backs? A man who has built his identity on external approval is like a tree that has grown in shallow soil. It may stand tall for a time, but the moment a storm arrives, it is easily uprooted. True strength comes not from being admired, but from being rooted in something unshakable, something that does not waver with the changing winds of opinion. Many do not realize they are trapped by this need for approval until they face rejection. When a person who has built his confidence on validation experiences criticism, he crumbles. He questions himself, replays every word spoken against him, and wonders if he is truly as inadequate as others claim. But rejection is not a reflection of truth. It is merely a sign that one has dared to stand apart. The chosen ones, those who walk their own path, are often met with resistance. The world does not easily accept those who refuse to conform. And yet, those who are truly chosen do not dress themselves in the need for approval. They do not shrink in the face of rejection, for they understand that their value is not determined by the fleeting opinions of others. The greatest achievements in history were not accomplished by those who sought to be liked. The visionaries, the leaders, the pioneers, these were men and women who understood that to create, to innovate, to change the world, one must be willing to stand alone. They did not seek permission to pursue their purpose. They did not dress themselves in the fear of disapproval. Instead, they clothed themselves in conviction, in the certainty that their path was theirs to walk, regardless of who applauded or who criticized. Those who live for external validation often find themselves exhausted, for they are engaged in an endless race with no finish line. They spend their lives performing, adjusting, proving themselves over and over again. But those who are truly free are those who have released themselves from this burden. They understand that approval is a fleeting thing, but self-respect is eternal. They no longer look to the world to affirm them, for they have learned to affirm themselves. In doing so, they walk lighter, freer, unburdened by the weight of opinions that were never meant to define them. Responsibility is a weight that many fear to carry. It is easier to shift blame, to claim helplessness, to say that circumstances, people, or fate have decided the course of one's life. But the chosen ones do not wear this mindset. They do not drape themselves in excuses, nor do they clothe themselves in hesitation. They understand that to be set apart means to reject the comfortable garments of self-pity and indecision, and instead embrace the weight of purpose. There are many who walk through life as though they are passengers, believing that external forces dictate their direction. They say, "I was born into this situation, so I cannot change it," or "I was never given the opportunities that others had." These thoughts settle upon them like a heavy robe, one that slowly constricts their ability to act. They become accustomed to waiting for the right time, the right support, the right validation. But the chosen ones do not wait. They do not dress themselves in passivity. They understand that time will never present the perfect moment. They must create it themselves. Self-pity is a deceptive comfort. It allows a person to believe that their struggles exempt them from action. It gives them permission to stand still, while others move forward. A man who sees himself as a victim of life's unfairness will always find reasons to remain stagnant. He will point to his hardships as justification for why he cannot rise. He will say, "If only things had been different, I would have succeeded." But self-pity is a garment that disguises itself as warmth, while slowly draining a person of their strength. The chosen ones do not wear this illusion. They know that hardship is not an excuse, it is a test. And those who are set apart are not those who complain about the difficulty of the path, but those who walk it regardless. Hesitation is another weight that slows many down. The mind creates endless reasons to delay fire of failure, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown. A person may stand at the edge of an opportunity and convince themselves that they are not ready, that they need more preparation, more assurance. But the chosen ones do not hesitate indefinitely. They know that every moment spent waiting in doubt is a moment lost. They act not because they are fearless, but because they refuse to be ruled by fear. Responsibility requires sacrifice. To truly take ownership of one's path means to give up the luxury of blaming others. It means to accept that every choice, every action, every outcome is ultimately one's own. This is not an easy burden to bear, which is why so many avoid it. It is far simpler to say, "This is not my fault," than to say, "I have the power to change this." But the chosen ones understand that freedom and responsibility are inseparable. A man who refuses responsibility also refuses control over his own destiny. The moment he stops looking for something outside himself to blame is the moment he truly steps into his power. There are those who believe that being chosen means being exempt from struggle. They think that those who rise above were simply given something others were not: better circumstances, better luck, better connections. But the truth is that being chosen does not mean being free from difficulty. It means being willing to endure it. It means understanding that every challenge is an opportunity to prove one's strength. The ones who are set apart do not avoid hardship, they embrace it, knowing that within it lies the very thing that will shape them into who they are meant to be. Some refuse responsibility because they fear the weight of expectation. They do not want to be counted on, do not want others to look to them for guidance, because they are afraid of failing. They believe that if they never take full ownership of their lives, they will never be blamed when things go wrong. But the chosen ones do not shrink from expectation. They know that to be set apart means to be an example, to carry a light that others may follow. They do not fear leadership, for they understand that true leadership is not about power, it is about service. It is about being willing to take on the responsibility that others avoid, knowing that the burden is what shapes a person into someone worthy of being followed. Many believe that comfort is the goal of life. They seek security, certainty, ease. But the chosen ones know that true fulfillment does not come from comfort, it comes from growth. And growth requires stepping into responsibility, even when it is difficult. It means choosing to act when others hesitate, choosing to push forward when others give up, choosing to rise when the weight of responsibility feels too great. They do not wear excuses. They do not drape themselves in avoidance. They stand firm, knowing that to carry responsibility is not a punishment, but a privilege. Fear is the great thief of destiny. It creeps in quietly, wrapping itself around the mind like an unshakable shadow. It whispers doubts, paints images of failure, and magnifies every uncertainty. Many live their lives enslaved by this invisible force, never daring to step beyond its grasp. They allow fear to dictate their choices, to set the boundaries of what they can and cannot do. But the chosen ones do not wear fear. They do not let it settle upon their shoulders like a heavy cloak, weighing them down with hesitation and regret. They understand that fear is not meant to be obeyed, it is meant to be conquered. Fear thrives on uncertainty. The unknown stretches before a person like a vast, uncharted ocean, and the mind fills the emptiness with worst-case scenarios. What if I fail? What if I am not enough? What if they reject me? These questions pile up, creating an invisible wall between a person and their potential. Many retreat at the first sight of this wall, convincing themselves that staying where they are is safer. They cling to the familiar, even if it stifles them, because the comfort of certainty feels better than the risk of the unknown. But the chosen ones refuse to be caged by fear. They see the wall for what it truly is, an illusion, a creation of the mind that holds no real power unless they choose to submit to it. Fear has a deceptive way of disguising itself as wisdom. It speaks in careful warnings, urging caution, advising against risk. It tells a person to wait until they are fully ready, fully prepared, fully confident before they step forward. And so, many spend their lives waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect opportunity, the perfect assurance that they will not fail. But perfection never comes, and in the end, they remain stagnant, watching others move forward while they stand still. The chosen ones do not fall for this deception. They know that courage is not the absence of fear, it is action in spite of it. They do not wait for the day they feel completely fearless, for they understand that day may never come. Instead, they walk forward with fear still lingering in their hearts, knowing that the only way to silence it is to prove it wrong. There are those who allow fear to dictate the size of their dreams. They aim lower, settle for less, shrink their aspirations to fit within the limits of their anxieties. They convince themselves that wanting too much is dangerous, that it is better to remain within reach of safety than to risk falling. But the chosen ones do not adjust their dreams to accommodate fear. They do not make themselves smaller so that fear can remain comfortable within them. Instead, they expand. They stretch beyond the limits fear has set, daring to believe in the impossible, knowing that great things are never achieved by those who stay within the boundaries of what is easy. Fear feeds on failure. It reminds a person of every past mistake, every moment of embarrassment, every time they have fallen short. It replays these memories like a cruel storyteller, convincing them that failure is something to be feared, something to be avoided at all costs. But the chosen ones do not see failure as fear sees it. They do not wear it as a mark of shame. They know that failure is not the end, it is a step, a lesson, a necessary part of growth. They do not cower at the thought of making mistakes, for they understand that every great achievement has been built upon a foundation of failures. They do not let past disappointments dictate their future, because they know that the only true failure is refusing to try. Fear is a master of control. It wants to keep a person trapped in the known, locked in a cycle of hesitation and self-doubt. It creates barriers where none exist, turning possibilities into impossibilities. Many live their lives without ever realizing that the chains holding them back were never real. They could have broken free at any moment, but they believed fear's lies for too long. The chosen ones see through the illusion. They recognize that fear only has power if they give it power. They refuse to be controlled by something that exists only in their own minds. They take back their freedom by acting in direct defiance of the fears that seek to rule them. Fear often disguises itself as protection. It tells a person to be careful, to avoid pain, to keep their heart guarded. And so, many close themselves off not just from risk, but from life itself. They do not love deeply because they fear heartbreak. They do not chase their dreams because they fear disappointment. They do not trust because they fear betrayal. But the chosen ones know that a life ruled by fear is no life at all. They do not build walls around themselves in the name of safety, for they understand that those same walls become prisons. They open themselves to possibility, to passion, to purpose, even when it means opening themselves to pain. Fear is not something that can be removed, it is something that must be faced. The chosen ones do not waste time trying to eliminate fear before they act. They do not wait for the day when doubt no longer whispers in their ear. Instead, they move forward with fear still present, proving with every step that it holds no power over them. They walk into the unknown, not because they are certain of success, but because they refuse to let fear dictate the limits of their lives. Many live their lives seeking approval, bending themselves to fit the expectations of others, carefully adjusting their words and actions to avoid criticism. They wear masks, shifting their identities to match the desires of the world around them, fearing that rejection is too great a burden to bear. They seek validation in the eyes of the crowd, believing that to be accepted is to be safe. But the chosen ones do not wear the need for approval. They do not shape their existence around the opinions of those who do not walk their path. They understand that seeking external validation is a never-ending pursuit, one that leads not to fulfillment, but to an erosion of the self. Approval is a currency many desperately chase, trading pieces of their authenticity in exchange for acceptance. They say what they believe others want to hear. They suppress their true thoughts to avoid disagreement, and they follow trends not because they believe in them, but because they fear being left behind. They convince themselves that if enough people approve of them, then they must be on the right path. But the chosen ones do not measure their worth by how many voices praise them. They know that external validation is fleeting, that today's applause can turn into tomorrow's rejection. They do not seek to be liked by all, for they understand that standing for something means being willing to stand alone. Fear of judgment is one of the greatest chains that bind people to lives that are not their own. They hesitate before speaking their minds, wondering how their words will be received. They delay pursuing their dreams, afraid of what others will say if they fail. They shrink themselves, not because they lack ability, but because they do not want to invite criticism. They believe that by avoiding judgment, they are protecting themselves, but in reality, they are surrendering their freedom. The chosen ones do not wear this fear. They know that judgment is inevitable, that no matter what they do, there will always be those who disapprove. They refuse to allow the opinions of others to dictate the course of their lives, for they understand that the only judgment that truly matters is their own. People often attach their self-worth to how they are perceived. A compliment lifts them up, and a criticism tears them down. They are at the mercy of others' opinions, their confidence rising and falling like a tide controlled by external forces. This dependence on approval keeps them trapped in a cycle of seeking validation, always needing reassurance, always fearing rejection. But the chosen ones do not build their self-worth on such unstable ground. They do not allow praise to define them, nor do they let criticism destroy them. They root themselves in something deeper, unshakable knowing of who they are and what they stand for. They understand that true confidence comes not from being accepted, but from accepting themselves. The world is full of voices telling people who they should be. Society sets its standards, dictating what is desirable, what is acceptable, what is worthy. Those who seek approval spend their lives trying to fit into these molds, adjusting themselves to meet expectations that are always shifting. They live according to rules they never created, sacrificing their uniqueness in the hope of belonging. But the chosen ones do not wear these expectations. They cannot allow themselves to be shaped by forces that do not understand them. They know that true belonging comes not from conforming, but from standing in their truth, even when that truth is unpopular. There is a dangerous comfort in living for approval. It offers temporary reassurance, a sense of security that comes from knowing one is accepted by the crowd. But this comfort is a trap, for it demands constant maintenance. One must always be careful, always be adjusting, always be mindful of whether they are pleasing those around them. And the moment they step outside of what is expected, the approval vanishes, revealing just how fragile it truly was. The chosen ones see through this illusion. They do not chase approval, for they understand that to live authentically means being willing to disappoint others. They know that not everyone will understand them, not everyone will support them, and that is not a failure, it is a sign that they are walking their own path. Many are afraid to embrace their true selves because they fear rejection. They believe that to be loved, they must be what others want them to be. They mistake approval for connection, thinking that the more people accept them, the less alone they will feel. But true connection is not built on approval. It is built on authenticity. The chosen ones do not seek to be loved for a version of themselves that is not real. They would rather be rejected for who they truly are than accepted for a false image. They know that those who truly belong in their lives will accept them not because they fit a certain mold, but because they are genuine. The need for approval is a burden that keeps people from stepping into their full power. It makes them hesitant when they should be bold, passive when they should be decisive, silent when they should speak. It keeps them in the background of their own lives, always waiting for permission, always looking to others for confirmation that they are enough. But the chosen ones do not wait for permission. They do not ask the world if they are allowed to be who they are. They take ownership of their existence, knowing that the only approval they truly need is their own.